question. And one of my favorites is whenever it's somebody's birthday, as we go around the table, everybody shares a favorite memory or story about the birthday person. And then the mom, whether it's her as the mom of the children or my mom as the mom of the adults, will share their birth story. And so we get to hear that once a year. And you'd think that after hearing it every year for their whole lives, those teenagers would be like, oh, here we go again. But they're not, because every year they hear something different because they're different. And so I think that's part of the process as well, is make a space, but then don't be afraid to repeat the same stories, because they'll hear them differently every time.
So, hi, how are you? So what's the favorite tool that you use all the time or in Ancestry? Because there's
so much, right?
So much.
Well, I have to say I am very enamored with AncestryDNA specifically. Part of it is because I just think the acceleration of discoveries is so fascinating, the opportunity to break through brick walls. But also for me personally, when you go back to the concept of family, every Sunday night for 4 hours, I'm on FaceTime with my dad, and that's what he wants to do.
I love that. I really love that you guys do that together. That's perfect.
Yeah, and so it's just so I now associate that with him and with my relationship with him.
Right.
And so I think that's probably why it's so close to my heart.
So does he work on it while you're like busy doing work, and then you?
He does, yeah. So he'll like preview the new matches every week, and so when we sit down on our call on Sunday night, I'll say, okay, what are we doing? And he's got a plan because he's kind of put it together during the week.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, I'm not trying to put you on the spot.
No,
I'm
you're
not
fine.
trying to do anything horrible, but I'm going to address the elephant in the room.
I don't know what that is, but okay.
The elephant in the room is the DNA more of it going behind the paywall.
Oh, yeah.
What is the thinking behind that?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so Ancestry launched AncestryDNA back in 2012, and the kits have been very low cost. We've tried intentionally to keep them very low cost. As a matter of fact, here at the conference, I think we're selling them for like $39 or something.
I have 6.
Right? But that's not sustainable. Like when you think about the concept of how much money it costs just to maintain the match lists alone, it's in the millions of dollars.
And storing the record.
Just storage and like all the technology. And so we want to continue to innovate and continue to provide new tools. And in order to do that, we need a revenue stream. And so we were really intentional about it. And one of the things that we realized is that people who just bought a DNA kit and never subscribed didn't understand the value of the match list. As a matter of fact, most of them didn't even know it existed. And so by making shared matches, so everybody still has full access to their match list, and that's a little bit of a misconception that's out there right now. People think we took away matches. We didn't. Right? You still have full access to your match list, but we've put shared matches and family trees and through lines as part of a low-cost DNA-only subscription. And if you already have an Ancestry subscription, you have the DNA subscription as part of it. And what we've actually seen in just the couple of weeks since we did that is people going, wait, what? I don't have access to this anymore? Oh, and now they realize it has value. And now they're engaging when they weren't engaging before at all. So it was a difficult decision, but it was a decision that needed to be made for the business. And it also was actually a benefit to all of the customers, because we'll see more people engaged.
When someone is getting started kind of learning about their DNA, because like you see people that they get a kit and they're like, oh awesome, I am this much Scottish, or I am this much Welsh. What would you suggest for them to make it more than just like, oh, I'm this much of this and this much of this?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So I think there's some things that Ancestry does. So one of the things Ancestry does is we send out emails on a pretty regular cadence saying, hey, you've got this new match, or hey, did you know this, or hey, have you started a family tree yet? Like we're constantly trying to engage people or re-engage people. But I think one of the things that I've personally seen as most successful is when matches engage their new matches. So one of the things you can do on your AncestryDNA match list is you can sort it by new matches, and you can see all the matches that you got within the last 7 days. And I don't do this all the time, because who has the time? But once in a while, I will go in and I will just send a message to every new match that came in within the last 7 days. And if they don't have a tree especially, and I'll just say, hey, it looks like you just showed up on my match list, and you also match my dad and my grandma, and so I think you're related to us this way, but you don't have a tree yet. And what I've found is that when I do that as a user, I actually see an increase in the number of people who are like, oh, how do I do that? Or, oh, I'll just go ahead and start a tree. And now all of a sudden they're engaged, or at least providing enough information that I can now figure out who they are and put them in my tree. Yeah.
Thank you.
For people who are new to finding connections through DNA, it's always a little bit of an awkward jog to be like,
Yeah.
hey, we're related.
Yeah, especially when it's close.
Crista. Yes. And it gets a little tricky, and I feel like it's pretty universal that people have reticence about that. And so I'm wondering, like, what's the dialogue that you would suggest for people to use when they are coming to new people? Because what's the dialogue that you would suggest for people?
Yeah, so the first thing is, it depends on how close the relationship is. Because the closer the relationship, the more careful you have to be. And I just had this in my own family just 2 weeks ago. A new match popped up, and my grandmother was his second highest match, and we did not know who this person was. And turns out he was adopted, and he was looking for his biological family, but if I didn't know that going in. All I knew was that he had a family tree, and it didn't match anything that we knew. And we know enough about our own family that we were confident that it wasn't us that had the unknown parentage situation. Which also isn't always the case. And so for him, I just contacted him and I just said, hey, it looks like my grandma's a DNA match to you, which means I think you're probably related to her. Maybe one of her first cousins is one of your parents, but I'm not quite sure. It doesn't match what's in your tree. And if I always approach it with curiosity and a little bit of hesitancy, right? Like even if I'm completely sure of what's happening, I'm not going to come across that way because that will scare people away every time. And so a little curiosity, a little hesitancy goes a long way. And then he responded, and we were able to open this dialogue, and eventually he revealed he was adopted, and we figured it out, and I've connected him with his half brother, and yay. But when it's a little bit more distant relationship and the tree doesn't make sense or they don't have a tree, again, I'm going to approach it with curiosity, but I tend to be a little bit more confident, right? I can say things like, hey, it looks like you're probably a descendant of this couple. Does that name make any sense to you? Right? And then I don't write a novel. I've seen people write way too much, and if you write way too much, people either aren't going to read it or they're going to be totally turned off by that. So 2 or 3 sentences, that's it, and just hope they respond.
Do you do any offerings? Like, I have a picture, you're going to want to see it.
No,
You're
not
gonna
in the initial contact, no.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like, I always talk about family history communication, whether it's through DNA or not, it's a little bit like dating, right? Like, you never offer anything up on the first date. It's just a bad move. And let me tell you, I'm single. I've done a lot of dating. So yeah, you just kind of play it cool and show that curiosity. I think that's the real key.
I love that. Thanks.
So when Sideview technology came out, there was some talk about grandparents. Is that ever
There
gonna...
was some talk about that because somebody asked me a question about what I would love to see happen, and that's what I said, and then somebody decided that was what Ancestry was doing.
Oh, darn it.
No, the scientists are working on it, though. It's just a trickier problem, right?
Yeah, I know.
Like, you think about it, separating sides of parents is easy because you have 2 chromosomes, you got one from one parent, one from the other. And we don't know which one's which, but we know one is one side and one is the other. But to separate by grandparent, now you've got to take a single chromosome and figure out which bits came from which side. And that's a trickier thing. Mm-hmm. So the science team is actively working on it. And I get super excited when they share with me what they're doing, and then they tell me to stop talking about it. Because then you all get all excited. And I'm like, I'm excited too, but it's not ready.
Okay. All right, I'll wait.
Patience for all of us.
Okay, I'm going to go back to the family thing.
Yeah.
Getting people engaged. So, do you have any tips for, it looked like you guys went on a big, travel thing.
Yeah.
Like, little ways to add family history stuff into travel if you know that there's maybe something, some tie there?
Yeah, so yes, I did take an epic journey this summer with a lot of family members. I'll be talking about that later this afternoon in one of my classes. With my dad, he's here, super fun. But this last summer, I also took a trip with one of my nephews. So I'm the fun aunt. Every time they turn 5, they get to go to Disneyland with me. And when they turn 13, I take them anywhere in the continental US they want to go. And nephew number 4 could not for the life of him figure out where he wanted to go. The others, like, I mean, the 11-year-old has already decided, like, they've got it, but he just couldn't make a decision. And I'm not sure what it was, but the National Genealogy Society Conference was in Virginia this last year. And so I said, I've got to go to Virginia. How about we just get in the car and drive? And then drive home. And so we drove out to Virginia and took a few days and then stayed in Virginia for 5 days and then drove home on the southern route. And so he got to see the whole country pretty much. And just the time alone in the car obviously has value, but we made 3 very specific stops on that trip that were very directly related to family history, including a cemetery in New Orleans where my great-great-grandmother is buried, and she's somebody that he has heard me talk about, and he didn't pay attention, I thought, until we got to that cemetery, and he said, oh, is this the woman that? And he repeated parts of the story to me. So when you think they're not listening, right, they maybe are, but then if you can connect them tangibly with something, a place, and now that is seared in his memory because this experience was so important and significant. And so I think one-on-one time with children is really important. And I'm an aunt, so I can do that a little easier. But I think that has value. But even when you're doing it in a group, I've taken all of the kids to the local cemetery here and had a similar experience with a group of them. But don't belabor the point. Like, then I took them to the park and had ice cream because we weren't going to spend 2 hours in the cemetery. So.
Especially for your immediate family, in my mind, they look at you like you've said before, Krista's got it.
She's got it,
right?
Yeah.
And so how do you branch out? Like, what are some things that you've done to kind of like push that boundary a little bit to be like, no, you too,
yeah.
right? Like
let's so there's a couple of things. So one is all people, human nature is captivated by story. So anytime you can tell a story, and don't make it long, but anytime you can tell a story, and anytime you can connect that story to who they are or what they're doing, right? A similar occupation, a similar personality trait, a similar life experience, I think that that's going to resonate with people. And even if they don't show interest in the moment, kind of like my nephew, it will come back to them and they'll be like, oh yeah. The other thing I'm a really big proponent of is environment. Like, if your environment does not reflect your love of family history, your family is not going to love family history. If you don't have a family tree hanging on the wall in your home, you're not doing it right. And I'm not saying that just because I just am in the process of buying Family Chartmasters. Which, there's an announcement for you. So, I have a personal passion and goal that there should be a family tree in every home. And I don't care if that family tree only has 4 generations on it because that's all you know, or if that family tree goes all the way back, 10, 12, 15 generations. Have a family tree in your home. I grew up in a home like that. I also grew up in a home that had pictures of my dad's great-grandparents on the wall over the piano, and pictures of my mom's grandmother with her siblings and parents on a wall in the hall, and pictures of, we were surrounded by pictures of families. And we didn't always know who they were as kids. My brother used to look at the picture over the piano and go, why is he always staring at me? And he was creeped out by it. But now he feels a connection to that ancestor as a 45-year-old man with children of his own who recognizes something of himself now in him. So if your environment doesn't reflect that you love family history, that you love family, that you love these people and their stories, I think your family, your children, your siblings who come in and out of your home, your nieces and nephews, they won't care either. So I'm really passionate. Family tree in every home. That's my new mantra.
For sure. Sounds like a t-shirt.
Thank you.
We're good? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.